begin, and when Steve gets back and he has copies, he can just jump right in, and then I'll finish up what he's done. My name is Les Downs. I'm the city attorney, and I want to thank all of you for being here. This is a wonderful turnout, and thank you not only for being here, but also for your service and everything all of you do. We couldn't do the city's business without all of you, and we appreciate everything that you do. Also, the last council meeting, the mayor is here and Councilman Thurman is over here. They instructed us on their behalf to thank all of you. Council is very appreciative for everything that you do, and your time and dedication in your positions. I want to begin. I have 3 subjects that I want to talk to you guys about today. The first one is the open meetings law. That's obviously something that you guys deal with frequently, whether you know it or not. You're doing things in compliance with that, and you want to continue to do that. The next subject I'm going to talk about is conflicts of interest. I know that it comes up a lot on your respective boards, the issues of conflicts, and I don't know that I'll have any answers for you, real clear-cut answers. Every issue where a conflict arises or supposedly arises is different, so there's no hard and fast rule on how to solve a conflict of interest, but we'll talk about that. And then the other thing that I want to discuss with you briefly is really exciting, and that is parliamentary procedure. But let me begin with the open meetings law. And Des, I'm assuming we can't get the statute on here. No, it's okay. No, that's all right. So I want to tell you that if you ever have a question, and I really want to emphasize this point, if you ever have a question legally, I invite you to call me. I don't get many questions from you. That's okay. I'm not, my feelings aren't hurt by the fact that you don't call very often, but that is what the taxpayers pay me to do, is to answer questions of anyone who's doing the city's work. You don't need to have that work, Keely. And anyway, so when I tell you about the legal provisions regarding open meetings, I don't want you to think I'm like giving you the law and saying, good luck with that. Now you know where to find it and we're done. I really want to invite you to call me if you ever have any questions, especially people who are chairpersons of commissions, but anyone who has a legal question, please feel free to call. You also can always call Steve, you can call Audra, but we are always here to answer any questions you may have.
Can you give your number?
You bet. My office number is 719-846-2354. And my cell number, it's best if it's during the workday. If you call my office, please. My cell number, though, is 719. Oh, yeah, well, why don't you just ask me afterwards and I'll give you my cell number.
We have the office number.
Okay, good, right.
For now, if somebody has
Good.
an emergency, we can help you.
Good, okay, thank you, I appreciate that. So I want you to know that the law that pertains to open meetings is almost entirely found at section 24-6-402 CRS. And it's a lengthy statute, it's a god-awful read, but it has basically everything that is required of us as governmental entities and what we have to do. So you all know that you have to before, and I want to say there are a number of categories that I want to kind of emphasize. One is everything you need to do in order to get ready for a meeting and to prepare for a meeting. The other one is what you have to do during a meeting, and then the last category is what you may have to do following a meeting. But regarding and one other thing, I'm sorry, I'm a stream of consciousness. Please understand that the legal requirements that we have, they're minimums. They are what we must do in order to be compliant with the law. There's nothing that says that we can't do more than what we are required to do, but everything that is set forth in the law is a minimum. So you all know, and I won't bore you with specific citations to the statute. I was going to have it here, and I was going to show you provisions, but that's okay. The first thing is that you know that you have to post any meeting 24 hours in advance. And if you don't, and you have to post it in the places where we regularly post, most of you know those locations. The trend legally is now towards allowing municipalities to post meetings on the city's website. Thank you, Des Sandoval, for the city website. But yeah, I know. But we still have to post in the locations where it's required for us to post the meeting. So you have to do that 24 hours in advance. You have to state with particularity the business that is going to be undertaken by the board and commission. And if you don't state with particularity what the business is going to be for your board or commission, then you can't do it, right? I mean, everyone who is a citizen or a taxpayer, they have a right to look at an agenda and know what you're going to be doing. And also, it's illegal. You can't, have an item off the agenda, have a meeting, and then try to get something done. Our legal requirements say that you post and you give the world notice so that anyone who looks at your agenda knows what you're going to be doing. And then if you don't post within a timely fashion, you just can't have the meeting that day. You have to do it another time. So please just understand that really is the only, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I have a real quick question. Does this apply to non-city boards and commissions too, or just city boards?
It really is only city boards. And I will tell you, there's a definition in the statute that I gave you that talks about what is a local political body. And a local political body is any subdivision of the city that is undertaking city business. So I think all the boards and commissions qualify.
Okay.
And if it's a non-city board, I mean, we're not really concerned with that because it's not, it's not one of ours. But I always tell people, like I get calls from the Chamber of Commerce and other places, and I say, you should comply with legal requirements.
Okay.
But that is what you have to do. Also, you need to know that, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. Steve, you just let me know.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready to go. But a meeting can happen even if you don't post it. Okay. We don't ever want that to happen, but a meeting can accidentally happen, and I might as well talk about that now. And that is, if someone sends you an email, say it's a staff member who sends you an email, and any one of you as board or commission members hits reply all and sends it, you essentially have just had a meeting, okay? And that is unlawful. And the conclusion of the statute that I've given you talks about if you have an unlawful meeting in such a manner, then it's not okay to go back and have a regular meeting and say what you did and what happened. That's legally called rubber stamping, and it's not okay. So you also can't have and the magic number is 3, okay? You cannot have more than 3 people meeting somewhere by chance and talking about commission business. You can't have people, in a group text talking about commission business, and you also cannot do it by way of email. Yes, ma'am?
More than 3 or 3 or more?
No, 3 or more. That's
Okay,
absolutely
just
correct.
more than 3.
Right, exactly. And that is for, it's for boards and commissions that are 5 and above. I think that includes every one of our boards and commissions. But I want to say this, and I'm a little bit reluctant to because we don't encourage this practice, but that is any one of you on a board can talk to another one of your cohorts on a board and you can discuss business. Okay? You can do that. You can call, you can email, you can text, one-on-one, that's okay. Now, is it a good way to do your business? Thank you, excuse me. It's not because it's not in the open, right? It's not a public discussion of your board's business that you're having, but it frequently happens. You can generally tell when you're watching a board if like everybody has been discussing something and they know what they're going to do because they will go, the item will come up on the agenda, nobody talks about it, and they vote, and they all vote the way they're going to vote without talking about why they're voting the way they're voting. You know what I mean? It's like they've already discussed it, let's say. You ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good.
But finish up what you're saying.
Okay, all right, so they'll just come out, and this always would happen with city councils in the past. They would come out without discussing an item at either a work session or a meeting, and it would be kind of an important thing, and they would just vote on it. And you really, I mean, if it is an important matter, you need to discuss it in public, say why you're voting the way you are, and just, you know, have a discussion of the item that you're going to be voting on. Now, if it's just kind of some, you know, housekeeping measure, then you don't have to do that. But you really, if it's anything of substance, you should discuss the rhyme and the reason as to why you're voting on the matter the way in which you are. It's the best practice. Now, I also want to say there is an exception. I'm kind of surprised that, you know, I get this question a lot, and that is, if it's something like an agenda, like your chairperson sends you the agenda and one of you hits reply all and says, well, I'm not available that day, you know, can we have the meeting another day? You can actually have that conversation. But it's fraught with peril because if anyone says, like, and by the way, are we going to have that one matter on the agenda? Because I really, you know, feel strongly about it, then you've really had a meeting, okay? And here's something else I want to say, and I want to really emphasize this. Everything you do in writing, and that includes emails, text messages, everything you do in writing is subject to a quorum request, okay? So if someone comes in and says, I want all email communication from the library board on everything they talked about on this item, we have to have staff contact the library board and say, we need everything you have, every email, every text, everything in writing that you possess in response to the quorum request, because we have a legal obligation of turning those documents over. So there are a lot of things to talk about regarding that, but before I go down that, I'll just turn it over to
Hey, Les, before you transition,
Yes, ma'am.
you want to just briefly mention that you talked about information, public information, bill information that is not available, or information that comes out of an executive session. Would you want to talk that in?
Well, sure.
And I'm going to go over a lot of this in my presentation.
Okay, good. Steve, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
It's
That's okay.
But no, if you have an executive session and the statute that I mentioned to you, incidentally, it talks about legitimate purposes for having executive session. And I want to let you know it's confusing because it talks about like state political bodies, that doesn't apply. It talks, I think, about subdivisions of the University of Colorado, that doesn't apply. And we have reasons why you can have an executive session for local political bodies. And one of the reasons you can have an executive session is to confer with the city attorney. So if you guys find that you're in a legal quagmire, you can say you want to have an executive session and we will get that accomplished for you. But I do want to say that you also, if you have something confidential, you can ask me to send information to your board, and that will be exempt from a quorum request, okay? I have council do this all the time. I have staff do this all the time. And there are many times in history where I wish staff would have done that, because then something gets controversial, we have a quorum request, and we have to turn something over that was not attorney-client confidentiality. I know this is probably getting a little bit confusing, but one thing I do want to say is verbal conversations are not subject to a quorum request. So if you had made a phone call to another board member and you had talked about an item, you don't have to generate a memo that says, I talked to so-and-so, my fellow board member, about this, and we discuss this item, okay? It's only for things in writing, which is to kind of emphasize the point that a lot of times you probably want to have verbal conversations only.
Yeah.
Okay, all yours, Steve.
All right. And some of you have gotten copies of the presentation. Apologies for the technology. It's always great when it actually works. Linda's bringing some copies over, so everyone will get a copy. But just wanted to start out by giving you a little background on me. I'm Steve Ruger, the city manager here in Trinidad, and I've been here for 7 months now. And it's been honestly just a complete privilege to be here and be part of the community. I've met many of you, but it's nice to see some new faces as well. So I'll give you a little bit about my background. I started in local government early in life, and that's all I've really ever wanted to do. So I got a bachelor's degree at Wichita State in sociology. Great degree. It was quantitative based, so lots of stats, which everyone loves. But there's not much that I really wanted to do specific with that degree. So in looking at my junior and senior year in college of what I wanted to do, government administration really stood out, and local government particularly just really hit me as a place where I can be directly serving residents and see meaningful impact in people's day-to-day lives. And so it's my passion. A group of friends of I who work in local government call ourselves local government nerds, so I'm one of those. And so I continued on to get a master's degree in public administration, and then started immediately working for cities. So I've spent a lot of time in local government working in finance. I was city clerk for a couple of cities for many years, where all the action happens. You get to go to every council meeting and be part of elections and the legislative process. And then from there, I segued into the city manager's office, and that's where I'm at now. So great, we have some extra copies of the presentation that we'll hand out. So while Des is doing that so kindly for us, Les has kind of touched on some of the issues, and I'm so glad he's giving that preface. And we're going to talk about those in a little bit more detail, and I definitely want you to feel free to ask questions as we go along. And of course, at the end, we'll have time for questions as well. Oh, and maybe we'll actually get the PowerPoint to work. Okay. So, well, it's good for you to have a handout anyway, because I think this is valuable information for you all to take back with you. So I'll just highlight today's objectives, and while Wally finishes setting up the projector. So first we're going to talk about what is the purpose of boards and commissions. What do you all serve for? What are you all doing? We're going to talk about you as representatives of the city. We'll talk about rules of decorum, which Les has kind of alluded to a little bit. Conflicts of interest, which is something that I think we all need to be mindful of. I'm going to give a crash course on parliamentary procedure, and then we'll get into some details, as Les was talking about, Open Meetings Act and the Colorado Open Records Act. I want to talk to you a little bit about our form of government, the council manager form of government, and then give you some highlights on some current projects and initiatives that the city is working on, and then we'll have time at the end for your questions and thoughts. So let me see if I can pull up this presentation, and we can get rolling. As it would be, it's probably going to work better on this side. And there we are. Okay, so. Look at all those already. All right, so let's talk about what the purpose is of a board and commission. So, your job, in most cases, there's a couple of exceptions, is to serve in an advisory role to the mayor and city council. So all of you have a specific board and commission that you are on for a specific purpose and topic. A lot of what prescribes your role is in our municipal code. So that's something that you can research on your own. It's on our website. But in general, whatever your board and commission is established to do, you would serve to advise the mayor and council on policy-making decisions. You're also there to serve as a liaison between residents, the city council, and city staff. So all of our boards and commission meetings, as Les was talking about, are subject to open meetings. So the public's invited and encouraged to attend your boards and commission meetings and be part of the discussion, and up to the chair, which we'll talk about later, provide feedback and perspective. But you as board members have the opportunity to really be kind of the face and voice of the public and get their feedback and then express that to staff, maybe your council liaison, and maybe even the city council as a whole. One thing that I think is very important that you all do is explore concepts, ideas, proposals, and directives. So I'm very proud of our boards and commission members. You all are so active and you all have great ideas. And that's what I think is part of your role, is to come to the table, talk about ideas, fresh perspectives, things you've witnessed in other communities, and have that discussion among your board members. And then directives, that would be in cases where maybe the city council wants to defer a policy matter to a board or commission for discussion. So they could ask Parks and Rec, hey, give us some feedback on what you would like to see as improvements for the wormhole, would be an example of where you might see that. Again, receive public input, and then become educated on best practices. I really think that when I see new board and commission members join, they come and they have a great perspective, great ideas, but I think throughout the process of attending meetings, learning from each other, learning from staff, there's a tremendous opportunity just to be educated, and then from there, you all can be champions for what you're doing to city residents and really express to them the importance of what you're doing and what you're talking about from a knowledge-based standpoint. So I do want to talk a little bit about representation of the city. So you all are appointed by the city council and you are a city official as such. So as representatives of the city council, city staff, and boards and commissions should be mindful of interactions with the public. I think it's incumbent upon us to present the city in the best light possible. We really should be champions for the city. We really should be very positive when we're communicating with the public. Focus on things that are really exciting and good. And so it's really just not good to be out there bad-mouthing the city as a representative of the city. And, you know, it's really important that we all hold ourselves, I think, to very high personal ethical standards as well. We want to demonstrate to the community that we're working for them, that they can trust us, and when we sabotage that trust by speaking negatively about each other and the city, I think that it kind of just doesn't do our city a very good service in terms of building camaraderie and building that positivity that I think Trinidad really should have. There's so much to be excited about. I don't want to be naive to say that there's not disagreements, and I actually really appreciate those disagreements. But I think we can work through those in a positive way and really just be respectful and mindful of each other and our community. And again, I do want to emphasize, I'm not picking on boards and commission members. This applies to city staff, elected officials, any representative of the city. Really, I think it's upon us just to throw out that positivity and be a champion for the city as much as possible. I'm going to be jumping back and forth a little bit. That's okay, I'll get my steps in today. So Les has talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to talk about rules of decorum. So this is something that I think is imperative as part of this training. And I'm going to get into some details on parliamentary procedure here in a little bit, but these are very important notes. So boards and commission members should always be respectful and courteous to other members. I really want to emphasize that. You're there as a team, you're one vote on your board and commission, and I think the level of respect that you would like to receive from your fellow board members is what you should be offering to them as well. And so public meetings are not the times for personal arguments or disputes or name calling or bad mouthing other board members. It's really the time for you to come together as a body to discuss your issues and be extremely respectful and courteous to your fellow board members. Again, these are public meetings. Some of them are videotaped and broadcast online. Some people from outside of Trinidad may actually watch some of our meetings, and again, that's a representation of who we are, and I think it's really important that we challenge ourselves to act in a professional and courteous manner. So let's talk a little bit about when you speak at a board or commission meeting. So really, you should be recognized by the chair. Every board and commission has a chair, and that person is the presiding officer for your meeting. It's part of decorum to, if you would like the floor, to request that from the chair and be acknowledged before you speak. I think oftentimes we get very emotional and animated about our discussions and we want to jump in. But I just think meetings should be, again, professional, well-managed, and the role of the chair is to acknowledge dialogue from you all when you'd like to comment on an item. So if you do want to speak on an issue, request the floor from the chair. The chair will acknowledge you and give you the floor. And then when that person's speaking and they have the floor, it's inappropriate for any other member to interrupt that person until they're finished, and then they call for the floor. So I'd love to see us get a little bit more professional on how we interact when working with the chair. Same goes for the public, though. I think that we oftentimes have public that come in and they're very animated about an issue. It's very important that the public should be respectful in the meeting, but also they only should be allowed to speak at a public meeting, same rules, with acknowledgement from the chair of that meeting. And this is just to maintain decorum and maintain process and make sure that everybody's being respectful. So if a member of the public is in the audience and starts having an outburst or yelling or screaming or interrupting, if it gets to the point that it's disruptive to the meeting, the chair can certainly ask for that person to leave the room. That is something that is very important. It's your meeting. You all are there to discuss city business, and I get that public can be passionate and have concerns about issues, but it's very important that we understand that this is a meeting of your body. Yes, the public's invited to attend and comment if they get acknowledgement from the chair, but it's not really theirs to hijack and come in and start causing a scene and disrupting the meeting. So I just wanted to make that clear as well.
Hey Steve, one thing I want to mention about that particular point is that whenever there's public comment, and that person comes forward, they're allowed to speak, of course.
Absolutely.
So let's say they go back and they sit down and they're being disruptive. The chairperson has the right to tell them to sit down, and if they continue to be disruptive, to remove them from the room.
Absolutely, yeah. Any disruption that's not acknowledged by the chair for a person to speak, there's always that time where you can ask them to be removed. I mean, certainly you want to politely ask them, hey, you don't have the floor right now. If you could please stop your comments. That's obviously step one. But if they continue to behave in that way and interrupt, that's when you may consider removing them. So definitely appreciate that, Mayor. All right. Conflicts of interest. So we're a small town, and we're bound to know people in this town and have relationships with them. So what I wanted to do is just read you, and you have it in your handout as well, what our municipal code says pertaining to boards and commissions on conflicts of interest. So boards and commission members have a fiduciary responsibility to their constituents and the people that transact business and come before them to ensure that their decision-making is independent, unbiased, and free from inappropriate outside influence. Stated conversely, it is of paramount importance that boards and commission members make decisions in the best interest of Trinidad and not themselves, their friends, or family members. Conflicts of interest can and will arise for board and commission members in many ways. It is vital to the decision-making process that boards and commission members exercise independent judgment free from conflicts of interest. As always, if a board and commission member believes he or she has a conflict of interest, the best course of action is to err on the side of disclosing in revealing the potential or actual conflict and seek advice from staff, the city attorney, in such a situation. So I just want to highlight, this is a provision of our municipal code. So this is local law. So our local law has this provision about conflicts of interest pertaining to boards and commission members. So I think we all need to be mindful of if we're making a decision that might affect a family member, or there may ultimately be some direct financial interest for us, we need to be very careful that we're going through a proper process of abstaining on the vote, certainly, and also not participating in the discussion. It's really not appropriate for someone who has a demonstrated conflict of interest to be influencing the board or commission otherwise and advocating for something to happen that may personally benefit them. So I think that's something we all need to be mindful of. And conflicts of interest, I think, can arise in a multitude of different ways. So anytime you have that uneasy feeling, this kind of doesn't seem like something I should really be discussing, I think it's great to go to your staff liaison and then seek the advice of the city attorney if need be. But I would like to pause and just see if anybody has questions on conflicts of interest or anything like that. And I'll give you a good example. So let's say the city wants to purchase a piece of property to develop a new park. And you own that piece of property. And you all are discussing it as part of maybe the Parks and Rec Board. It would be very inappropriate for you to participate in that discussion because you may financially benefit from the city purchasing that property. So that's an example of where a conflict of interest might arise. Les?
Yeah, if I could, please, I just want to add a couple of things. Thank you, Steve. And that is, if you do like a Google search of conflicts of interest, there's a lot in there. But seriously, I know. But you can Google this and get a lot of information. One of the most important things on a conflict is, how does the conflict arise, okay? Because and I want to say, having a conflict of interest is not a bad thing. Right. I mean, you're not going to be able to vote on the matter probably if it's an actual conflict, but it's not a bad thing. It is what it is. I hate that quote, but I use it all the time anyway. And so a conflict is best if it's raised and disclosed by you. Right? If I'm a board member and I know this thing is going to be coming down the pike and I have, a family member, or I have a financial interest in that matter, then it's best if I say, I may have a conflict of interest and I want to let all of you know about my potential or actual conflict of interest. If it's somebody who's raising it against you, then it's worse. And I also want to say that simply because someone says you have a conflict doesn't make it so. Doesn't mean you're automatically going to have to disqualify yourself. But it's best if you see it coming and you disclose. I also just want to say, my last thought on this is that frequently the people who have the biggest conflict of interest of all fight the hardest to deny that they have a conflict of interest. It's insane. It's like that is you're like, no, that is not, and I insist on voting, and that's not fair. If you're someone coming before a board of business, you don't want them to have an interest in something that is going to keep them from being an unbiased arbiter of your matter. You want them to just be, free and clear of any kind of interest. So,
one thing I was going to mention to add to that is sometimes it arises that if you're unsure whether or not there is a conflict of interest there, the best thing to do is ask your chair. If the chair does not have the answer, to get hold of you.
Right, or just open it for discussion amongst the entire board. Right, I mean, and that's absolutely right. And ask staff, if it comes down to whether or not it amounts to a legal conflict, then it will, wind its way to me, or you can just call me. But the best thing about it is, the best way to approach conflict is to be open and transparent and just say, this is coming, I want to make you aware of it. And that is really the hallmark of a person who may not really have a conflict of interest. It's okay if you do. All you have to do is not vote on that one matter. but it just makes it look like you're not as, tied into something if you're the one who raises the potential conflict of interest. Thank you, Steve.
No,
So-
I really appreciate that, Les. And the other thing I would say is public perception is everything. So you may be very certain that you don't have a conflict of interest, but a member of the public might feel differently. So I think to Les's point on just disclosing that, in fact, Les, if we get to that point, can even give you language that you can say at the meeting, I realize there may be a potential conflict of interest on this. There is not because of these reasons. We have that happen at the council level. And it just, to Les's point, it gets it out there so everyone's just aware. And honestly, this is not, and I'm glad Les stated this, conflict of interests are not a bad thing. And really this is to protect you from any backlash or anything that could possibly happen. We really want to make sure that you as boards and commission members are acting in a professional, safe, knowledgeable manner, and I would hate to see anything come back on any of you because of a conflict of interest that wasn't disclosed. All right, any other questions on conflicts of interest?
Is it mostly financial though?
Doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be, but yeah, financial is probably going to be the biggest one. But anything where you're an advocate, there could be direct personal benefit to you. It could be exchange for goods would be another example of where, hey, if you support a P&Z member were to support a new development, they get like exclusive access to the club at the new hotel or something like that. So it can arise in many different ways.
It could be a family member.
Could be a family member
I
too.
mean,
That's a good point. It could be a family member who benefits from a decision that you're making as well.
Contracts, bids, and all that kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, contracts, bids, that type of thing. Yes?
How many lawsuits are filed against the city if somebody doesn't like the way the conflict of interest is handled?
Absolutely. I don't know that we've had any.
Not in my 11 years, but, the statute I gave you, there are provisions for if anyone feels like they're aggrieved, by a decision or an action by a board or council, if they make a mistake, you have a right to file a legal action in district court. If you prevail, you get attorney's fees, and if the aggrieved party prevails, they get attorney's fees, cost of litigation, and whatever the judgment may be. So it hasn't happened, thank God. I'd like to keep it that way.
Yeah.
But it's pretty easy for someone, if there is something done incorrectly, to file a legal action and at a minimum get their costs.
Thank you.
You bet.
And then also, I think public perception as well. Just maintaining trust with our public is just so important. And even if it doesn't get to the point of a lawsuit or legal action or challenge to the city council, we still want to maintain that trust and make sure that our public feels like we're being very open and honest in our operations.
Let's say you have a neighbor that has an issue you're close with the neighbor, and how that conflict of interest arises or doesn't arise. That might be something, because that might be brought up by somebody else in the community, say, "Oh, he's your neighbor."
Well, and having a neighbor may or may not be a conflict of interest, right? And it's like, he's my neighbor. And so, doesn't mean that I can't vote on this, but you're right. I mean, like, people who have lived here all their lives, Mayor, you might have a very good friend, has been your friend from childhood, and I may not know that. They're coming before council, they have business, and what is best there? That you disclose it. And you say, I know this guy, he's my friend for many years, he has business, I am going to disqualify myself. Rather than someone learning of the conflict and saying, this is your good buddy, this is not appropriate for you to do. And you'll look bad if you get called out on it, and it is a conflict, right? But a lot of things can happen. And also, you can create your own conflict. And I hate to, go through specific examples of recent happenings, but you can have a council member or a board member who gets so wound up in something that when it morphs into something else, they can't stay on it. I know I'm being obtuse, but you can create your own conflict. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
I just wanted to let them know that.
Yeah, and what I would recommend in a case like that is if a neighbor comes to you and says, hey, you're on such and such board, I really want you to do this, say, why don't you come to a board meeting and address your concern to the entirety of the board, so we can all hear it at the same time. Question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, so we talked about the case, a conflict of interest when a decision might benefit a family member, but let's say specifically you're looking at a decision in which you know that if it was voted yes, it might negatively impact your family member.
Good
Is
question.
that still a conflict of interest? Like, do I not vote in that case?
I was just thinking,
Yeah.
and yes, I mean, let's say you have an ex who comes before, I mean, I'm sorry, it's a silly scenario, but an ex coming before your board who has business, and you're like, oh, I don't like what you did to me, and right, and you are punishing them and being more likely to cast a no vote.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, you get an impartial tribunal and the people who make it up when you come forward. So if your ex is on the board, it's not disclosed, they have business, and your ex convinces a couple of their, I'll use the term cronies on the board to also vote no, and your very meritorious proposal gets denied, it's like, wow, that wasn't good.
Well, that's just being petty.
Well, you're right,
And
but it's a
that
conflict.
would be,
If you're right, you're right. Oh, so let's see, is pettiness common in Trinidad once in a while? Yeah, once in a while.
I love that Les uses the example of an ex, and that's what he starts with.
Yeah, just a pure hypothetical.
And I would just add to that. I mean, to me, if you have friction or conflict, positive or negative, the decision's a little higher level than that. This is my husband, and I'm making a decision that affects them. Whether it's positive or negative, I'm going to abstain from the discussion and the vote because this is something that's of interest to them.
Something else that has arisen in the past is, let's say there's a controversial issue in the community, and the community knows that you are a pro or con, it might be wise to recuse yourself. If
That's
you're
correct.
If you're that adamant about.
Right. Well, that's a reason why also, if you know something's going to be coming before you,
Yeah.
you don't want to cast your lot on one side or another, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Great questions. Anything else on conflicts? And Anissa kind of pointed out, and I think it's worth mentioning, if you have another example that can come up, especially in Trinidad, since we're so closely connected, would be a contract. So let's say you have a spouse that owns a construction company and you're making a decision that might favor that construction company. You would want to recuse yourself from that as well. Sorry, I keep saying recuse. That's one thing that there is a difference. Recuse is actually not the right term, I believe. It's abstain.
Right.
Yeah.
I say that all the time too.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Now let's talk about parliamentary procedure. I'm going to preface it by saying I love the collaborative nature of our boards and commissions, and I don't think that you need to have a parliamentarian sitting there and being strict about the rules. But I just wanted to highlight what parliamentary procedure looks like, and in general, you should follow kind of these tenets. So first and foremost is motions, and that's where you're placing an item for vote before the board. So in all cases, the chair should ask for that motion and say, can I get a motion on this item? Chair can make a motion themselves. However, it's better if they don't. They're really the presiding officer for the meeting. There are some cases where it may be appropriate for the mayor to make a motion, particularly if maybe they're sponsoring an item. But in general, the chair should be in the position of asking for the motion. And then a board member may say, I move to do such and such. And at that point, it has to be seconded. And once a motion and a second is made, the item is in the hands of the entire board or commission at that point, and it can only be disposed of in certain ways, which we will talk about. But mostly, it needs to be voted on, and it either passes or fails. That's kind of the standard. But once that motion is on the table, all discussion must be limited to just that motion. So it's very inappropriate to have a motion to, let's just use the wormhole example, a motion to provide new picnic tables at the wormhole on the floor, and then in the discussion start talking about something that's happening in Central Park. You need to dispose of the motion before you move on to further discussion. So that's the basic of placing a motion. Once you have a motion on the floor, again, it's in the hands of the entire board or commission, but it can be amended. And that would be a subsidiary motion where someone may say, you know what, now that we've discussed the main motion, I think we need to add that they need to be handicap accessible picnic tables at the wormhole. And in that case, someone can say, I move to amend the main motion to include the term handicap as part of the picnic tables. That would be seconded. So now you have a subsidiary motion on the table. You can only discuss that amendment at that point. You can't go back to the main motion and discuss that. You can't discuss any other item of business. Only discussion can happen on that amendment. So someone could say, I don't like handicapped people, which, you know, they'd be a total jerk. But it
Do not say that.
Yeah, right. Who knows? Who knows what they might say? We would hope not. But there could be a discussion about, I want them to be of a certain color, that type of thing. So once you get into other things that are not really germane to that subsidiary motion, you really can't discuss those things. So you would vote on the amendment, it either passes or fails, then you're back on the main motion, and at that point it can either be amended again by vote and second and that subsidiary motion, or you would have discussion and then vote on the main motion. So those are the basic orders of motions. There's a whole bunch of nuance. If anybody's ever seen Robert's Rules of Orders, it's about that thick. And so we just want to, again, loosely follow basic parliamentary procedure. I don't see any board or commission getting too far off track than just basic motions and amendments. Point of order. This is very important. So anybody on the board or commission is able to call a point of order at any time. If you don't feel like decorum is being upheld or the parliamentary procedure is being upheld. So for example, on the previous discussion, if you have a motion on the table for picnic tables over at the wormhole and someone starts talking about Central Park, another board member may say point of order. At that point, all discussion stops, and it's incumbent upon the presiding officer, the chair, to make a determination and a ruling on that point of order. And so what would be appropriate in that case would be for the chair to say, this is not germane to the main motion, we need to stop the discussion about Central Park, and then you would move on. So another point of order would be if someone starts talking over you and interrupting you while you have the floor, you could call a point of order, and the chair would have to make a determination, and the proper determination would be, please refrain from interrupting, this member has the floor. So anytime you feel like the procedure or the meeting decorum and parliamentary process is getting out of line, you can always call that point of order, and the chair makes that determination. Yes, sir.
I assume the chairman can call a point of order.
Absolutely.
As well, right?
Yeah.
There's another part of that. Let's say there's a problem that the person who is starting to talk and addresses the chairman disagrees with the ruling of the chairperson.
Yeah.
Then the chairperson could take that to all of the board, or
Yeah.
to actually take a vote on that, whether it moves forward or not.
Absolutely, and that's called an objection. So if the chair makes a ruling and someone on the board disagrees with the chair's ruling, you would call an objection. And then at that point, the decision would be put to a vote of the entire board on how to resolve that point of order. Making sense? Clear as mud, as they say. I did want to point out, oh yeah, question please.
I just had a question about the point of order.
Yeah.
The point of order can only be called by a board member. So I'm just, because I have
Yeah.
unfortunately been to a meeting where I was a guest
Yeah.
and was interrupted by a board member. I, as a guest, cannot call point of order.
Unfortunately, you cannot call a point of order as an attending person to a meeting. Only members of the board and commission can call those points of order.
Okay.
But now that you all are trained, hopefully if that happens again, someone on your board or commission will be have your back and say, hey, no, I don't like this. So, but yes, only boards and commission members can call those points of orders. So a couple of things that I think, it's semantics, but it's important to me. Again, I was a city clerk for going on 10 years, and so this was my life for a long time. But to table an item is a little bit different than postponement, so I wanted to distinguish the two. If you table an item, it needs to be considered at that very same meeting. So sometimes we use the term table and we think that we're just disposing of that item and it goes away. Let's move to table this, and there's a vote to table it. That actually doesn't make the item go away. What it does is it lays it on the table. It's from old parliamentary rule, but it still is an active item that has not been disposed of as part of your agenda. So it's very important that if you table an item, the proper course would be to bring it back as an item and dispose of it before the meeting ends. So I just wanted to point that out. It's more of a nerd thing for me, but I think sometimes we get confused. We think tabling this just makes it go away, and that's not true at all. So if you're following proper parliamentary rule, the table process, you still would have to consider that.
Steve?
Yeah.
Can it be tabled and placed on the next agenda for a future meeting?
That's the next item, Marty.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Absolutely, but you're spot on. So I wanted to point out, so the difference is postponement of an item. So really, if you want to discuss an item at a future meeting, you think we don't have enough information from staff, we want to wait until something happens before we discuss this, there can be a motion to postpone the item to a future agenda. I would always recommend postponing it to a date certain. I think it's really important that you say we're going to bring this back at our next meeting, or our meeting in March, or our meeting in July, but set that expectation, certainly so staff knows when to bring that back on an agenda, and then also so that you know when it's coming up, and sometimes things just fall off and then never get considered, even though it is an item that has been presented to the board and commission and needs to be disposed of in some way. So any item that's on the agenda that is not an action item, and I'll talk a little bit about that, there's no issues there. But when you're making decisions and it's something where you have a motion in a second, that's where these rules kind of come into place on the tabling and postponement.
One thing about that is if there's a particular item like you're talking about, like in city council, you have a city clerk that could tell you, well, it's going to be the next meeting or a month down the road.
Absolutely.
However, in the boards and commissions, you don't have that person there, so the best way to handle that would be.
Well, so most boards and commissions do have a staff liaison, and that staff person should be there with a calendar and say your next meeting's on this date. Is this where you'd like to postpone it to? Yes?
Suppose you need to have more information and you don't know how long it's going to take to gather the information.
That's a terrific question. Yeah, so, and I see that happen a lot. So we're uncertain how long it's going to take to get that information back so we know when to act on this. What I would recommend is postpone it to a reasonable date, and then it'll come back up on that agenda, and if you're still not ready, postpone it again. But it just keeps the item coming and on your radar, so that we're demonstrating to the public, nope, we're still discussing this item, we're still considering it, we just don't have the information yet that we might need. Yeah, Jen?
I hate to open a can of worms, but this is relying and referencing agenda
Yeah,
as a formality.
yeah.
Do you have anything to share with us about the process for creating an agenda that is equitable and fair and representative? Because for me, it's very random. It ends up being a chair, well, I think we'll talk about this.
Yeah. I mean, in an ideal setting, staff liaisons should be working with the board or commission to generate the agenda. I think Marty is a really good example of that on the tourism board, and certainly we're willing. We're not perfect, and I'm willing to have conversations with our staff too to help formalize this. What Marty does is, I think, 1 or 2 weeks before the meeting, she'll send an email out to the board and ask them, do you have any items you wish to bring forward on the agenda? And I love that process. I think that's a really good, equitable way to do that. Now, there are, in staff's operations, sometimes items that a staff member may want to say, I'd really like this board or commission's feedback on this, and they certainly have the ability to put that on an agenda as a topic for discussion. I would also recommend that chairs work closely with their staff liaison to preview the agenda before it goes out and make sure that they're signing off on that as well. I think that can be a powerful tool. But I appreciate that, Jen, and I will look into that with staff and make sure we're kind of copying Marty's model and have a good process for making sure we're getting that information.
Just to go,
Please.
is the root cause of how some conflicts can arise in these meetings of really well-meaning citizens who
Yeah.
join the board because they have, they're interested in supporting the community,
Yeah.
but aren't really aware maybe,
Yeah.
or engaged in the process of creating an agenda.
Okay. Yeah, that's terrific. I mean, it's terrific feedback for me, and so we will work on some processes that are standardized for all of our boards and commissions, so we can get that feedback and input and I like the term you use, an equitable manner. So, Marty,
Is there anything in here about the responsibilities of the staff liaisons appointing these boards?
no, we will do a separate training on that.
That's because I think we need some
Absolutely.
training too.
Yeah, absolutely. We will definitely do that, Marty.
Okay.
All right, and I do want to talk, well, let me go over these and then I'm going to talk about agendas in general. So, right of reconsideration. So, let's say you voted on an item and you don't like the outcome of it, or something comes up later in the meeting and you think, oh shoot, I'm kind of changing my mind on that item. I think I'd like to have this item reconsidered. And so you can make a motion for a previous item on the agenda to reconsider it. And what you would do is in the meeting, it's a first level motion. So you would say, I'd move, you'd call for the floor from the chair, and then you would move to reconsider item number 6B, for example. And you would need a second on that. There would have to be a vote of the entirety of the board in affirmation of reconsidering that item. And then that vote happens, then the item comes back in front of the board for reconsideration. At that point, you would get a fresh motion and a second on the item, discussion, and then you can have a vote on that item for reconsideration. Can the item come up at a future meeting? Technically, yes. But I think it's very important that you're not digging up an item from 10 years ago and reconsidering it. What I would recommend in those cases, if there was a policy decision that was made 10 years ago that you don't like, you would want that to be a fresh discussion item on an agenda, not a reconsideration of the original action, but it would be a change of policy at that point, and you would discuss it and have a vote to go in a different direction.
I think that particular item, I think there's a period of time.
There is a
that you
period
have
of
that
time.
you can bring it, but I think it has to be by the next meeting, if I remember right.
It's usually by the next meeting, I think, in Robert's rules. And so, yeah, you're correct, Mary. It's something that, and I'll check on that and get that information out to everybody, but it is very quick. Unless there's another rule that oversees that, and I don't think there is. Rules of voting. So one thing that I think is really important for you all to know, unless there's a conflict of interest, as we discussed earlier, you are required to vote, yes or no. So it's very inappropriate for you just not to vote on an item because you don't want to, for whatever reason. Maybe you just don't want to have anything to do with it. You don't like the item. Unfortunately, as representatives of the city, you're tasked with this decision-making process, and so you do have to vote on every item, yes or no, that comes before you, unless you have that demonstrated conflict of interest.
One thing, if I could, please.
Please, Les.
I'm sorry. You are allowed to do a secret ballot.
Yes.
Now, I know that sounds very undemocratic, but if you have something like really controversial, you can have your board vote by writing on a piece of paper and signing that, write how they're voting, and then signing the piece of paper and then turning it in, and then the staff liaison, the staff liaison will add them up, give them to the chairperson will announce the vote, and then later on, I think within 72 hours,
Yeah.
everyone is going to know how you voted. But if you have a need for that, you don't have to vote right then and there in a public manner. Sounds bad, but you can do it.
The other thing, two things.
Yep.
One is, we have the ability now where you can participate virtually if you can't be at your board and commission meeting.
Yep.
The other thing is, I want to talk about proxy votes, if there's such a thing.
Proxy vote, well, you can't submit your vote in writing if you can't be at the meeting, for example. So you're not allowed to do that. You actually have to be in attendance at the meeting to be eligible to vote on an item. But you can vote if you're attending by a Zoom call or a virtual thing, as long as you're present. The basic rules are it has to be audible so that the public can hear you, and you have to be present for the discussion as well. But it has to be something like if your microphone is not working on your Zoom, for example, I don't think a thumbs up would cut it. We need to have an audible yes to that vote.
And I think we used to allow proxy votes. I mean,
Did we?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow.
But anyway, it's a digression.
And then let me talk about minutes, and then we can go back to any other questions on parliamentary procedure. Minutes are required for all of your meetings as well. And so really the basic things that have to be contained in minutes are who was present, the time and date and location of the meeting, and a record of the action items that were taken. However, we typically put some discussion in our meetings for context as well in our minutes, and I think that's very appropriate. But you all approve minutes at your next meeting, and that's your opportunity to say, well, I said this in the meeting and I really want this in the record. So what I recommend is that you get with staff or whoever does your meeting minutes ahead of time, let them know you want that change, and then at the meeting, that change can be discussed, but you're giving a heads up to everyone, or at least to staff that have those revised minutes at the meeting to present. And we see that happen from time to time at the council level, and I think it's really important that everyone's able to have the record express what they would like it to do. However, you're going to get caught if a staff member or whoever's doing your minutes thinks you're lying. That's certainly not appropriate. So you can't go back and change the record. It has to be an accurate representation. Really, the only time I think it's appropriate for you to say, hey, this is wrong with the minutes, is where maybe you said something that didn't get captured as part of the discussion and you would like that included. But the minutes have to be a reflection of what actually happened at the meeting. So if you said something that you regret, can't go to the minutes and say, nope, we're going to change that so it says what I meant to say.
I think the question I have on that is that do minutes have to actually be physically recorded, or can they be put like on a CD disc for keeping forever? Can that be done?
Well, Steve?
Well, I don't believe there's any requirement that you do audio or video recordings of minutes at all. The paper minutes are what matter. So, and those are what are signed as well. So that's the official document. For most of our boards and commission meetings, we do collect an audio record, sometimes a video record. That is still deemed a public record, which Les has already talked about a little bit. We'll talk about a little bit more. So because we're creating that, that still is an official record of the meeting as well. We're just not required to create that. I think Elizabeth had a question next.
I just wondered about any differences or distinctions with work sessions versus regular meetings.
No.
Minutes. We still need to take minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, any public meeting is required to have minutes.
Do
Yes,
we
ma'am.
have to have every meeting recorded?
By audio or video?
Well, or by the city?
No, it doesn't need to be recorded.
So we could have a meeting that is not recorded,
That's correct.
because we were told we had to be at a place like the city hall that they would record the meeting.
Maybe we do.
I think Roger said,
Yeah.
I asked that question at the department head that we do have to
I was going to
have.
say, you really do need to. You should.
I want a yes or a no.
Yes.
There needs to be a record.
Okay, I'll go to the attorney on that question.
Yes.
You have to have it recorded, you have to be in a place that is recorded.
Okay.
Why?
So you have a permanent record of what you did.
So,
You have to have a permanent record of what you
but
did.
that's not what the minutes are for,
No,
right?
actually, no, because minutes are frequently just a recording of what the person taking the minutes remembers, right? So if you have an audio recording, there's no question about what was said or what was done or how it was done, right? Minutes are just somebody's contemporaneous recollection, and we have corrections of minutes all the time. Where they're going to take a right, omit something or whatever. So, yeah, so a recording is an actual, accurate.
But we could use a phone. I'll tell you where we were is we are art, and we were looking at the parks. We couldn't go to the parks because that was the sunshine law, and we could not look at places for art. we had to stay in City Hall.
Okay, so,
And so if somebody had a phone and we were recording us, at that time, we couldn't do that. We had to be at City Hall, so we couldn't go out and look in the park.
I would say what you could do is, I mean, that's obviously a work session. So you have a recording of the meeting, and then you say, we as a board are now going to go look at various, artworks in the community. We're going to rely on the minute taker to, reflect what we looked at and all this, and just rely on that portion of the meeting to be recorded by minutes. You could do that. But otherwise, if you're in a room, it's your board, it's just better to have it recorded so that if there's ever an allegation of you guys doing something improper, you have that recorded. But if you're going to go out like on a field trip, you don't have to record the whole time.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, no, thank you for putting that in context.
Yeah.
That's a great
I
point.
just want to point out that most smartphones record, so
Yeah.
that, is an option too.
But it's hard sometimes to get it, to make sure that, right. Yeah. Good point.
Well, twofold, I have a twofold question.
Sure, Margie.
For any boards or commission that meet here, we do have a little dictation with their own little
Oh, cool.
insert, so you can label it and keep it, if it's here.
Okay.
Number two, my question pertains to the minutes, and it said it needed to be signed.
Yeah.
Who on the board needs to sign
The
it?
chair signs the.
Chair signs.
Yes.
Okay.
Chair signs the
Thank you.
minutes. So if you're not doing that, I really think you should be, once the minutes are approved, have the chair sign them as the official copy and the record of the meeting.
I just got a quick question.
Sure, Marty.
Does the city clerk, Audra, need a copy of every board meeting minutes? Should they be sent to her?
I would say yes. It's probably something we want to ask Audra, but it's imperative that we're keeping that record.
Because we've been kind of inconsistent with it.
Sure. Yeah, the most important thing is that we have that record if requested and that we're archiving it. But I think the city clerk is the records custodian for the city, so it's always appropriate to send copies of minutes or any other documents we want archived to the city clerk.
I think, I'm not sure, but I think all the boards and commission, either the chair or the secretary of the chair
Yeah.
of the commission, might not be a bad idea to provide them with a audio thing, kind of like we do for executive sessions.
Yeah.
So that, and give that to whoever's doing the minutes.
Yeah.
Because I know that, it's recorded and put on YouTube and Channel 71. But this way, whenever they're putting together their minutes, they can go back and
Yeah, and that's the,
find out what was said
I
possibly.
think Lee was saying
Yeah.
that you have access to a recorder for most of it.
Since we have all of our meetings.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Don't have to be a good idea to provide them.
absolutely. And I'll get to you real quick, just one last comment before I take Karen's question. That's the other thing that's really important for the recording is, like Les alluded to, when minutes are being drafted, sometimes it's hard to write down everything that's being said at the meeting, so it's really helpful to minutes takers when they're drafting those to have that reference to go back and make sure, did I hear that correctly? In fact, me as city manager, having the video recordings of the city council, multiple times I've had to review those recordings and say, I think I heard this. But let me make sure I'm correct, and I didn't just dream that up last night. We had a question from Karen and then a question back there.
Was discussed, we can just say the topic that was discussed, and then what most important part of minutes is a vote, like
Yeah.
you said, the date, who's there, a vote, who made the motions,
Yeah,
and then the final vote.
yeah,
And when it comes to Colorado Open Records Act, et cetera, and laws,
Yeah.
minutes documented on paper or visually, and say, sent to Audra,
Yeah.
isn't that the most important piece of documentation from the meeting?
I don't know that I would say,
As opposed to a video, say you have
the minutes
technological
constitute.
failure.
Right.
Minutes are the documentation that's most important legally.
It depends on who you ask. Minutes are the official record of the meeting, but if you have like I said, if you have a video or audio recording, and I don't know, there's some lawsuit, that may be an important piece of information for a court to have.
And Karen, if it comes down to, relying on someone's memory in the minutes and say, let's say you're going back for a year before, and you're saying, I by so-and-so, and it's not in the minutes, you would go to the audio record or the video record to see if that was actually stated. So I would say that the recording really takes precedence because it's going to be a more accurate version of what was said, by whom, and when it was said, right?
But legally, what can people ask for? What are we required to provide legally by
If we
law?
have a quorum request,
Isn't it meets minutes?
It's everything. If they request a video or audio for a meeting, we have to provide that. Any public record would have to be provided.
I have a question. We were told we only had to keep them for 6 months.
The audio recordings?
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct, I believe. So,
So,
question back here in the corner.
you better have
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hi. I have quite-a-bit of experience from union for 25 years.
Can you speak up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was in a union for 25 years and went to a lot of meetings, sometimes twice a month because I was on the executive board. And as far as minutes goes, I took a lot of minutes in my life where I had to write down everything that was said. And there were times where I wish I had an audio recording that I could refer to get down everything. But on the other hand, the next month, we would read those meetings aloud and make changes like you said earlier. But having that audio recording is just a great benefit to have when writing the minutes. And it wasn't until recently that our union, which, that those are completely different rules because it's the NLRB, but that they decided to record and do the meetings with the minutes from the recording. So I just think they're helpful. And also, every meeting we had, there's a basic outline that we had that you go down, starting with roll call the meeting, roll call, new business, old business, whatever. And I think that's what you're talking about as far as having that, give to all the commissions so that they have a basic outline for an agenda. And then on that agenda, you could put in the specifics, like let's go to new business, and then you wouldn't have to write down specific agenda items because they would be included in the new business.
Yeah, and we will talk about it.
Something like that, I think, is going to be very helpful.
No, terrific. And Karen, I think just one last point on your question. So there's different retention schedules for the different types of media. So an audio and video recording, I think that's right. We only have to keep them for 6 months. But if we are maintaining them, they continue to be a public record. But minutes are the permanent record. So I guess that would probably be the big distinction. Minutes are required to be permanently archived in the city's records. So 10 years from now, the minutes may be the only thing that's left that we would have to provide if requested. Yes, sir.
How would a member of the public, if they wanted to, say somebody asked me, what did you discuss at the last meeting?
Yeah.
How would they find minutes or the audio or video recording?
Absolutely. The easiest way right now would be to go to the city clerk's office and fill out a records request form. And then I'll talk about Cora, unless it already has, we would be required to provide that information within 3 days.
And is it okay for me to use my best guess of what I recall that we talked about, or should I just refer them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
In answer to that, just remember that Mr. Murphy records all of our, especially city council meetings and other meetings.
Yeah, not all the boards and
Not all,
commissions, but
the
a couple.
majority of them, and you can go back and refer to the entire meeting.
I post those on the city Facebook page.
Yeah.
Lee?
We like technology.
Yeah,
so
good.
we really want to do Zoom.
Okay.
And I know that you can record via Zoom.
Yeah.
We just record all of our meetings via Zoom, whether we have someone zooming in or not, and then maybe send this to Mr. Murphy to put on.
Yeah, I think there's no reason you can't record using Zoom and archive it that way. That's not a problem at all. Yeah, Marty, question?
Quick question on work sessions.
Yeah.
So we do need to record minutes for a work session.
Yeah.
Do you require a quorum for a work session?
So, yeah, quorum is, thank you. Let's talk about quorums. Quorum's required for it to be considered a public meeting, period, whether it's a work session or a regular meeting. So if you don't have what constitutes a quorum, which in most cases is going to be 3 members for a 5-member board or 4 members for a 7-member board, if you don't have that quorum present, you can still meet and talk, but it's not considered a public meeting at that point, in which case you wouldn't need to take minutes. You wouldn't need to follow the agenda or anything like that. So whenever there's a meeting of less than a quorum, and we'll talk about open meetings in more detail as well, you could freely have the discussion. So if there's a topic where 3 members are there 2 members out of a 5-member board, then you could have that discussion. No minutes would be required or anything like that.
What if it's a scheduled meeting with an agenda?
It doesn't matter. If you don't get a quorum that shows up, the whole public meeting thing goes away.
But two people could still sit and talk.
Sure. They can talk about the agenda. They can talk about whatever they want. They're not violating any open meetings laws, but you wouldn't call the meeting to order.
Right.
There wouldn't be a record taken of that meeting or anything like that.
And you couldn't conduct business, you couldn't.
You can't vote on anything.
Obviously.
Yeah, you can't vote on anything.
The other thing too is in work sessions, only you can do is take a consensus, you cannot take a vote.
Right. Yeah, no final action to be taken in work sessions. Jen?
3 for a 5-member board, 4.
Sorry, 2 for a 5-member board,
4 for a 7.
4 for a 7-member board.
For quorum, 3 and 3.
I'm sorry, I'm kidding. I apologize. A quorum for a 5-member board is 3 members,
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Now I'm still confused.
3 for 5, 4 for 7.
Sorry, that's right, for a quorum.
A majority.
Majority, yeah. If you have a less than a majority of board members there, then you do not have a quorum.
That only pertains to boards and commissions, does not pertain to city council.
It does pertain to city
It
council.
does pertain to city
So I thought
council.
it was city council, only 2 could.
No, you can't. So if you have a vacancy on city council and then someone isn't there, right? So you only have 5, then a quorum is going to be 3. But for a 7-member board, 2 is never going to be enough.
Yeah, quorums,
yeah,
exactly.
right,
That's not
right.
allowed open meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no quorums, yeah. Question back
I
there?
think he just answered it. I'm on boards that have vacancies.
Yeah.
And so we have a 7-member board, but we only have 4 members.
Yeah.
So the honors, our quorum would be 3.
Right.
Not 4 because
Right.
of how many we should have.
Correct.
That's right.
Correct. Okay. And then let's a little bit talk about agendas. I didn't put it on here, but I just wanted to point out whatever the agenda has to be published 24 hours in advance of the meeting for the public, which goes on our website, and only matters appearing on the agenda can be discussed. So it's very important that if something comes up that's not listed on the agenda or not germane to something that you have listed on your agenda, that you have no public discussion on that. However, what you can do is, as part of the meeting, say, I would like this item to be brought forth as a future discussion item, but no discussion can take place on that item. So the city council is a good example of at the end of the meeting, there's a section for councilor comments. And it's okay for the council to mention something they're working on or something they're going to bring forward or something they're sponsoring or something that happened. But where it becomes a problem is if the council, other members of the council start discussing that item. That's a public discussion that hasn't been advertised to the public, and it's not allowed under the open meetings laws. So only things appearing on the agenda are up for discussion.
I see on some agendas though, and some of the boards do it, is they put down there, say there's A through E, they put on E, other items to be discussed.
Yeah.
Now, is that legal or you shouldn't do that?
You really shouldn't be doing that. What I would, you can put that item on your agenda, but what I would have it be is, are there any other items, or are there items you would like to bring at a future session?
Exactly.
And then someone can say, I'd like at the next meeting to discuss this item.
The mayor does that to us all the time.
Awful. Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying that, Marty.
It's his favorite part.
Absolutely. Question here.
Yes, I have been in not a city board meeting, but where they, before they begin, the chair will say, are there any amendments to the agenda?
Yeah.
Can you do that?
You cannot add items to the agenda, but you could remove an item to the agenda.
I see, okay.
Or you could maybe reorder the order of business on the agenda. If you have an item that you would like to discuss ahead of something else, you can call for a vote to rearrange items on the agenda. You cannot add anything to the agenda.
Got it, okay.
So in that case, when you go to new business, it would be new business that's on the agenda to to discuss for the first time at that meeting.
Yes, it should, and if you have a bullet or a section of your agenda that says new business, and there's an item for discussion, it should be listed on the agenda
But
already.
if it hasn't been listed on the agenda,
Yeah,
you can propose it for the next meeting to be on the agenda.
absolutely.
So,
Yes, sir.
What do you do when you ask the public, someone sitting in the audience, if they have anything they'd like to bring up?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to discuss that, or do we have to just table that for the next meeting, which is part of the...
That's a great question. So anytime there's public comment on something that's not listed on the agenda, it's just a general, we want to hear back from you what your issues are. Certainly they can be invited to speak, but really there should be no discussion on that item that they're bringing forward at that meeting. But you may wish to bring that as an item for a future meeting. The mayor does a very good job of that. In City Council, we have a section of the agenda for public communications, and members of the public will come up and speak, and the mayor will constantly tell them, okay, this is not a back and forth, there's no discussion on this item at this meeting, but we will take that under consideration. And it's very important because, again, it's not an item we've listed on the agenda. But if a board member or a commission member wanted to bring whatever a member of the public brings up at a future agenda for discussion, totally fine.
how about at a work session, Steve? Can you have other items of the discussion on a work session agenda?
Nope, same rules apply to work sessions and to regular agendas. So work sessions are virtually identical rules-wise to a regular meeting. The only difference is you cannot take final action on anything discussed in a work session.
So you were saying that it's good to have it on the agenda a couple of weeks ahead of time. What if the night before a meeting you think of some brilliant thing and you add it?
Yeah, so and I'll talk with staff. I think we want to start coordinating with our boards and commissions ahead of when the agenda is created, but the 24-hour rule is the major one. So any item that's not publicly listed on an agenda 24 hours in advance of the meeting can't be discussed. So if it's the night before and it's 5:45 and your meeting's at 6 o'clock the next night and you put something on and get it out, that's fine.
Okay. That's something that needs to be
Yeah, Karen.
So planning for an event would be a work session?
That's it. Okay. So I love the nuance on all of this. Thank you for all these questions. It could be a regular meeting. You can discuss anything. So you can have discussion items on a regular meeting agenda. Work session, you can have discussion items where there's no action taken. So in your question, it'd be either or.
So you can talk about it, you just can't make a decision.
Exactly. A work session, you can't vote on anything.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
I would just recommend for most of you, just hold regular meetings. Unless there's a single item you want to explore, really vet and have a discussion on, then maybe you'd have a work session. But again, you can discuss.
Do you have to call the work session? We're on Papa's brand new tree board. We're planting some trees.
Yeah.
We have very few people.
Yeah.
And we go to the meetings to plan.
Yeah,
We can do this.
of course.
And you're not to slap our hands.
I'm not going to stop that.
Every planning meeting could be called a work session.
Yeah, as long as you're not taking final action,
Right, we've already decided that in previous meetings.
that's fine. That's fine.
The best thing to do is to remember, whenever you have a work session, it's more for clarity
Yeah.
of an item.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
It's more for clarity of an item.
Can you come to consensus in a work session about something that you don't think requires a vote, or it's not an action item, but it's more like, does this work for everybody?
what I would say on consensus is think of consensus more as direction on where you want to head than taking any kind of semblance of final action. So you wouldn't want to go to everybody and say, are you good? Are you good? Do you support this? And get yeses and nos. But consensus may be, yeah, we think this is an important enough issue that we want to bring this to a regular meeting to vote on. If that makes more sense and clarification. You don't want to give the impression at a work session that you've already made your decision and made final action on an item. But you certainly can kind of gauge the perspective. So I'll take things to a work session of the city council, perhaps it's an amending ordinance, and ask them, is this something you want to move forward with? And that's the type of consensus I'm looking for. Then we bring it to a regular meeting for discussion and vote.
You know, what I do in our city council meetings is after any discussion is done, I'll ask the city manager, do you have enough information to bring it forward in a regular, whether it's an ordinance, a resolution, or
Yeah.
whatever. That's probably the best way to do it.
Jen?
I'd like to move that we move on in our agenda.
Okay.
Very good. Is there a second?
That would be call the question, by the way. Well, we're on a break. Let me look at the time. Yeah, let's take a little bit of a break. We're at 11:35, and then we'll wrap up with just a couple of things. So take a 10-minute break.
French mob steaks.
Yeah. This is very, very good. Yeah. Oh, hell,
Les has already given you some good information, so we can get through this rather quickly. But really wanted to highlight again and just express the Colorado Sunshine Law. And so let's kind of dive into that just for a couple of minutes and look at what that says. So, open meetings laws, that Sunshine Law is colloquial, but basically what we do as public business, we talked about quorums and meetings, that's where this comes from. So any meeting you have that has a quorum of members is subject to open meetings laws. And the big things that I want to express on that is, well, these bullets. So you specifically, as boards and commission members, are called out in our open meetings laws at the state level. So we can't get around that. You are public bodies. A meeting refers to any kind of gathering convened to discuss public business, whether in person, by telephone, electronically, or by other means of communication. Again, the law applies to any board, commission, or other advisory or policy rulemaking body of a political subdivision of the state and any entity that has been delegated governmental decision-making function, hence you all. A couple things I want to start by talking. Les has already done a good job, I think, of talking about email meetings. So please do not reply all to any meeting. That's first and foremost. Emails can spiral into a public meeting, and so can phone conversations or in-person conversations, what I call a rolling quorum. So let's say two members get together to have coffee and talk about an issue. And then both of those members go to another member of the board or commission and say, hey, Susie and I got together and talked about this. This is what we decided. This is what we talked about. Now we have what's a rolling quorum going on. You have 4 members, maybe of a 7-member board or even a 5-member board, that are involved in a discussion about an item of public business. So you've looped in more than, what constitutes a quorum into that discussion. So at that point, we are in violation of open meetings laws. So it's not inappropriate for 2 of you to get together and discuss an item, or 3 of you, depending on how many members of your board you have, as long as you don't have that quorum. But you really shouldn't be talking about that with other board members or having discussions outside of a public meeting. So if a board decides, hey, this is a really important issue, these 2 people have a lot of expertise on this, we'd like them to get together and then present back to us at the next meeting, that's terrific. But make sure the presentation comes at that next meeting and is not something where you're emailing other board members, even text messaging other board members. What do the kids do these days? Snapchatting other board members. Whatever these youngsters are up to these days. TikToking. So, and then the one point I wanted to make, though, because it does come up from time to time in discussion, a public meeting does not include chance meeting or social occasions where public business is not the central purpose of the meeting. So let's say you're on historic preservation is a good example, and you're all attending an event that's happening at the Fox Theater. You can all certainly go to that. That's not a public meeting. You can talk to each other, but you're not allowed to discuss public business. And I've seen this happen. In fact, I've been involved, not personally, but I have been involved with cities where there's been lawsuits on this happening. So you're there, you're casual, you're having a cocktail, great. Don't talk about public business. That's the rule. You can talk about the weather, you can talk about anything you want to, nothing that has to do with your role as a board or commission member.
What if we're strategizing for an event?
If the board is planning that event and it's under something that board is tasked with doing, that would be a matter of public business. So definitely shouldn't be having those conversations on planning an event that the board's involved in. And really, that event would be considered something that would be public business. So just stay away from anything that has to do with your role as a board member.
So
Planning
does that apply to before the event is approved as something that the board would be working on, and thereafter, like, when you're planning an event, sometimes you meet and you need to pick out what plates you're going to do or whatever. Is that applicable as well?
Yeah, if you have several board members who are there picking out plates for an event that they're hosting, I don't know, Les, what do you think?
Probably not.
Probably not on that.
Yeah.
Probably not on that.
I was just gonna say, it's kind of a technical thing, it's
Yeah.
not really something that, is it a public, something that the public needs to be involved in,
Right.
I guess.
I would say if it's something you're going to vote on or make a decision on, that's probably the gold standard of what you should be. If the board's going to vote on what the event's going to play of a public meeting. Okay?
Thank you for the clarification.
And emails, so staff, we're great resources. So if you saw a great idea in another community and you want that to be sent out to the board, get it to your staff liaison. They can send it out to the board because they're not part of the body. So they can send it out to the board. And when I send emails out to the council, when Les does, oftentimes we'll include, please do not reply all, just as a reminder. So you don't want to be replying and getting into a discussion by email. And I know Les talked about that a little bit, so I won't belabor those points, but just wanted to point that out. And then talk about Cora. So every communication that you have in writing is subject to open meetings laws, and that includes TikTok, text messages. Snapchats go away, so I don't think we would ever be able to get those. Facebook messages, anything that you're generating as part of your responsibilities as a board member is a matter of public record. And what that means is if a member of the community came in and said, I want to see all of Jen's emails for her role on the Parks and Rec Board, she would be obliged to provide those within 3 days. There's certain exceptions where we can deem it an extenuating circumstance and go for 7 days, but the law is very clear. We have to provide those records virtually immediately. So what I always say, rule of thumb, is don't put anything in writing that you wouldn't want the newspaper to see. It's just very important. So if you're writing something, now the chances of someone doing a records request and asking for your emails or text messages, admittedly, are very slim. But I've seen it happen. And so I just definitely recommend, don't put anything in writing that you don't want out there in the public.
The other provision in that is information Cora does not apply to unless a court system is involved in an executive session discussion.
Yeah, executive session, and there's some exceptions here too. Communications that are personal in nature, confidential messages from constituents about a matter relating to that constituent, any work product, including documents relating to drafting bills by attorneys. But attorney-client privilege communications is really, I think, what precipitates that from executive sessions. When you're in an executive session with less, that's deemed attorney-client privilege, and that's a different section of the law, but that would not be admissible. So there are some exceptions, but general communication correspondence, all releasable. Chris?
What about public versus private emails?
I was just going to talk about that. So if someone says, if you're using your personal Gmail account to receive agendas and information and communicate on the board, it doesn't open up all of your emails to be subject to public record. So all of your personal emails are not public record at that point. If we did get a records request, you would be required only to provide the emails that are responsive to that request. Same thing with text message or anything else.
If I could add to that, though, a lot of people may not be forthcoming with the emails they turn over, right? So they may say, here are the emails that I've given you, and they say, well, I think there may be more. And people, of course, are going to be inclined to try to hide emails that are embarrassing to them. So that can precipitate more discovery requests and further, more expensive discovery.
And the other thing I always say about emails, text messages, there's a sender and a receiver. So you may have deleted it from your account, or you may not want to provide it in a records request, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to pop up somewhere else from the other side. Okay. And then I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a reform of government. This isn't really specific to boards and commission training, but again, as a self-proclaimed local government nerd, these things are interesting to me. So we have what's called the council manager form of government. And so what that means is we have a city council who is elected at large in our community, 6 council members and a mayor. And what they do is they hire me, a professionally trained city manager, to manage the day-to-day operations of the city. So department directors report directly to me, and my job is to be kind of the administrative side of local government, the executive side of local government. I don't formulate policy decisions, that's the job of the council, but it is my job to work with staff and make sure that the council's decisions and directives are being carried out in a professional, ethical, and professional manner. So the opposite form of government to this is strong mayor. And you think of a city like Denver, so in that case, the mayor is elected as the head of the executive process for the city. All the department directors report directly to that mayor, and the mayor basically serves as the CEO. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that difference. I think it's great that Trinidad has demonstrated they want professional management. I'm a champion for the council manager form of government, and I think that the council has been terrific, by the way, so we have a great relationship, and I think we're partnering and getting some great things done for our community.
The reason why I believe that this form of government that we have is ideal for our community is because the mayor is basically the head of the community, but is responsible for signing all legal documents. I attend a lot of the stuff that goes on, like meetings like this or other meetings, whereas the city manager is in charge of the day-to-day operations. And I think that is the best way, because I think when you're a mayor and a city manager, you've got to handle both. It's almost impossible to do that.
It is.
Unless you have a deputy, a large enough community, which I think they do, they have maybe a deputy city manager, which I haven't met in the past.
Elizabeth, you had a question?
I was just going to say, so where and how is the council manager versus the mayor model established? Is that by law, by consensus, by?
Actually, let's go to the next slide and I will talk about that. It's established in our Home Rule Municipality Authority. So we are what's called a Home Rule Municipality, which I wouldn't want to be anything but. So what that means is that residents here have enacted a charter by vote. The charter is essentially the constitution of the city, and that's where our form of government is prescribed. So the voters of the city of Trinidad have decided this is the form of government that we want. To change our form of government, it would require a vote of the people to go a different direction. But to talk about what home rule is a form of structured government defined by the citizens of the municipality, and that charter allows for more control over matters of local significance. Voters decide that. In general, the city of Trinidad can act by vote of the people in our charter, laws and processes not specifically mandated or otherwise prohibited by state law. The whole goal is to provide for what's called maximum self-governance. So it allows us to really define a governmental structure that's best for our community to the maximum extent possible.
And the other side of that is the statutory rule of government, form of government. And what I've read is that home rule allows us to, in some cases, actually supersede what the statutory rules are.
Yeah, there's state law that expressly provides for a home rule municipality to deviate from what the state says we would have to do otherwise, and that's another benefit of being home rule. So it really gives us a lot more power to control our own destiny in our own community. And I think I have one more slide and we're done. I just wanted to briefly highlight some current project initiatives that the council is working on. The Hilton Garden Inn is supposed to come online here pretty soon. We're very excited for that project and having a new hotel in our downtown. And I know that's of prominence right now. It's going to boost our lodging tax a little bit, so there's a great benefit for the community. And certainly we hope residents or visitors are shopping in our restaurants and shopping at our stores and supporting our business community, especially having something so close to downtown. First Street, you probably have seen. I don't know if it's any more messy now that it's under construction than it was before, but
getting complaints about that.
Yeah, but thank you for bearing with us as we go through this process. I'm happy to announce, though, that the bids for the project came in significantly under estimates, which freed up some money, so we were able to do all of the additive alternates for that project, including replacing a much-needed sewer line on Commercial Street, and then some other bells and whistles that are just really going to make that project top-notch. We've got a commitment from the contractor. They have a $365 day period to perform the work. But we've worked with this contractor before, and they've consistently gotten the work done ahead of schedules, and we expect no less for this project as well. So good news on all fronts on First Street. It did take us a little while to finalize the engineering to get it out, and we thank you for your patience on that, but it's a long time coming. It's going to be an asset for our community. Riverwalk, the city council has partnered with the Greenway Foundation out of Denver, and for those of you not familiar with the Greenway Foundation, they are a top-notch river designer, and they did all of Confluence Park and the South Platte Riverwalk in Denver. So it's just a complete privilege to have them here in Trinidad. They're working on the area of the river right now between Commercial and I-25, and we're hoping in the next month or so for them to come present to council their vision and us starting to get through the process of making some decisions on enhancing that area. So we're really excited for that. And with that, Jared Chatterley over at our outdoor recreation office is working on enhancing trails. One of the things he's pushing really hard for is to have a trail that goes from the river all the way to the lake, so we can build in that connectivity. And I think connectivity of our trails is something that we need to put to the fore in our operations as we become a modern outdoor destination city. Main Street improvements. We don't have a construction budget, but I'm really excited to announce that we just issued an RFP to do a beautification project of Main Street from Animas to I-25. And I'm so excited for this project. I think that having, when you get off Main Street, just this beautiful, grandiose entrance into downtown and letting people know that we have this just a couple blocks away and feel that when they're coming into town will be a slam dunk. Krista's excited for it too. So. Fox West Theater. So excited to announce some of the things that are happening there. If you haven't been to Trinidad Tea, I'm going to start there. Talk to Krista. It's tremendous. What a great business to have in our community. In fact, all of our businesses are just so great. But as part of the Fox West Theater, that's the first business to open there. So that's signs of life that the theater is coming back into its old glory and heydays. So we're excited for that. Where we're at now is we've completed both of the storefronts, the front part of the theater. We've done remediation of hazardous materials. We've done some stabilization projects. We've reconstructed the front doors. They're not on there yet because we're waiting until we get a little further on in the building. And we got a DOLA grant for about $680,000 to do an infrastructure enclosure that's going to provide for the HVAC for the theater as well. If anybody knows where you can pick up a rock and find $25 million, we're partnering with Urban Neighborhoods, a company out of Denver, Dana Crawford. It's her company to help us with fundraising, and we're really trying to hit up any donation we can get and really make it work. I'm excited to also announce that the marquee for the Fox Theater is going to be rehabilitated and displayed here pretty soon as well. And we're hoping to use that as a fundraising tool so that we can garner more interest in the Fox. I think it's just such a treasure to have here in our community, and we're so lucky, and I cannot wait to see it come back to its full glory. And then just a couple of economic initiatives that I can talk to you about. The big one is a company called Ecotech, and they're a biofuel company that wants to come in and take downed trees from the forest and convert it into jet fuel. And so we're partnering with them, and we're very excited. They will bring 90 specialty jobs to our community. They have a commitment to hire locally, and so we're really excited to see that come in. We have some produce growers that are eyeing Trinidad to come in and produce produce for some national retailers, and there's consistently a lot of interest in economic initiatives here in our city, and I don't see that going away anytime soon. So very good reason to be optimistic about our economy. I think you may know or may not, marijuana is kind of going away. I think with New Mexico legalizing, we're not seeing the revenues that we once saw. But the council, for those of you who don't know, actually did something which I think is completely brilliant. They decided not to authorize expenditures from marijuana revenue until it's received. So it doesn't directly impact our general fund and our ability to operate the city. So even though marijuana revenues are going down significantly, our budget is showing some signs of slowing down in general, but not to the extent that we need to be alarmed or concerned right now. So we'll be able to continue with the momentum that we have already going in our community and keep going. So I think that's it, unless anybody, oh yeah, Mayor.
A couple of things is the distribution of the marijuana fund is, how we do the,
Yeah.
you might mention that there.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point for boards and commission members, funding for boards and commissions. There was a time where we gave boards and commissions a budget directly to spend a certain amount of money. Unfortunately, just the way our budget is and marijuana money at this point, we can't offer that like we used to. So what we do offer is on third quarter marijuana, we allocate that for boards and commission requests. So that'll happen in September, October-ish. So be thinking about projects you would like to see done and request out of marijuana money, and we can help get some of those initiatives going. So we'll take your recommendations, your pricing on things that we can do to improve our community, and then be able to ask the city council for some funding out of that quarter of marijuana release.
And the last thing is just going back to some of the earlier discussion, executive sessions, to make sure that anything that's discussed in executive session stays within that discussion, and also quasi-judicial matters is something that may be explained to. Right.
Well, yeah, I'll let you do that, but executive sessions, I mean, there quite frankly shouldn't be much of a reason that most of our boards and commissions would have an executive session. So I don't think you have to worry about those per se. It could be something that might happen at planning and zoning level, that type of thing, but for most of you, you would never have to deal with that. If you ever do, Les will come in and school you on it.
And you can. I mean, it is an option for the boards and commissions. There's nothing that says that you can't. But also in quasi-judicial matters, it just means that you really need to stay free of influence. You don't want people trying to sway you one way or another. You're like a judge. You're trying to remain influence-free when you decide what it is you're going to be deciding. So you don't want people to lobby you.
Yeah. Any other questions or anything?
Where's Ecotech going to be located?
Ecotech, they're eyeing a piece of property up north in our industrial park area that would require an annexation. So, they want to be on the rail lines to ship their jet fuel.
Nice.
Yes?
About the Fox Theater,
Yeah.
are there intentions to revitalize the ballroom downstairs?
Yes, great question. Yes, that is definitely part of the design, and having that community space, I think, would be tremendous for our city. But yes, that is part of the redesign and the rehabilitation.
Is there a timetable for Fox?
It's all predicated on raising the money to rehabilitate it. Once we receive the money, I would imagine it would be a couple-year project to do the construction. So the quicker we can raise $25-ish million, the quicker we can get that theater back up and running for y'all.
I've got a couple questions on when or approximately when the renovations to Central Park will take place.
Yeah, Central Park, the council has allocated $1.25 million this year for upgrades at Central Park, and it requires a little bit of planning and a little bit of effort to figure out exactly what the major needs are there. Our Public Works Department is working on that as we speak, so hopefully you'll start seeing some improvements. The improvements may not be effective this year because it does take a little while to do the construction contracts and get everyone out there, but hopefully going into 2024, we'll have a much better facility for our residents.
Thank you.
Yes?
Am I allowed to ask about an indoor pool?
You are allowed to ask. And I have a couple of answers for you. One, we do recognize that as the number one, based on a recent survey, the number one issue that our residents have brought forward to us. And there's a lot of things that come to the council for funding requests, but I think it's important that we as a city are responsive to our residents and keep that in mind. So we're definitely looking into ways we can make that happen. It comes with a hefty price tag, of course, but we're optimistic maybe we can find some grant money, maybe we can find some ways of funding that. But the new hotel, I did have a meeting yesterday with Mr. Chimino. They are going to provide indoor swimming for residents as part of their pool there as well.
Nice.
So I believe it'll be a membership type of thing, but and limited hours, a couple hours at a time. But at least there is temporarily an option that will be available to our community. Any other questions? These are great things. Yeah, Elizabeth.
Do you have like a really rough estimate of what an indoor pool would cost?
I would say,
Ballpark.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that's involved in creating an indoor aquatic center. Maintenance, ongoing maintenance is something we would have to factor into the ongoing price for that, and they're very expensive. Most of the time, any fees we would collect for use of the facility wouldn't even begin to cover the operational costs, so we have to be mindful of that in future budgets. Construction, I can throw out a number. I don't know how accurate I am, but I can tell you I was involved in a contract to build an indoor aquatic center. It was several years ago in 2009, and at that time, it was $8.9 million. So I would imagine we would be talking about a price tag near $15 million to get anything that would be meaningful at this point. Yeah.
What if you were to partner with District 1 and turn your existing indoor swimming pool to something? Right now, I know that it's storing desks.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that that's something we should definitely look into as well. I think all options are on the table, and for a while the council was exploring covering our outdoor pool, and looking at the feasibility of that, there's just no way it could happen. And quite frankly, I would much rather put money that we would spend doing that into the development of a modern aquatic center for our community than spend it to cover something that's really not going to be useful and doesn't have lap lanes. Sir?
Forgive me if this isn't the right venue, but you did mention marijuana funding and whatnot. I was just wondering if the city has made any efforts to kind of make Trinidad a destination like in the way they do in Denver, providing legal places to actually use the products that they buy here, either indoors or wherever. I don't know.
Good question.
Great question.
It is a good question.
And the Trinidad Hilton, would be a perfect, the garden, I mean, I can imagine people wandering over there and getting stoned or whatever. I mean, I don't know.
And I'm going to step over here when I say this, but that's a policy decision of the city council, so I will defer to the mayor.
We have a 4-3 split on council. Last time it came up. 4 opposed, 3 in favor.
Getting a lot of opposition from the community citizens.
That it would be the money we need for all our projects.
Could be.
It's hard to make money off of consumption facilities, but I think you're absolutely right, Maura. I mean, the impact it would have on bringing people in and that kind of, tourism could be very helpful.
Question from Lee.
I just adding on consumption. I personally am opposed to the current system because I live in a neighborhood where we have an Airbnb right next door to us that's 420 friendly. And it has taken cannabis away from a central location and taken it into neighborhoods where my neighbors' children play. And in the summertime, I can't even open my kitchen window because people from Texas are out on that place, like smoking stinky stuff, and like my whole kitchen will smell. So I think that personally, like the current system isn't working because it pushes it into the neighborhoods where there are children.
And we do services in our community, so we have that
Well, and like Les said, I think the council has kind of, made their determination as it stands now. But I think any feedback that you all want to provide to the council and anything, you want to share with them for their decision-making process is definitely appropriate. All right.
Thank you.
Steve Roper, everybody.
So is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, right.